Our guest in this segment is the Superintendent of Schools in Berkeley County. He knows all about the effects of sugar on kids, Dr. Ryan Saxe. Good morning, sir.
That's because I am an example. At least that's what my wife would tell me.
Very nice, very nice. We just spoke with Mark Peacemaker at Kevin Knowles, a home show coming up, and Mark with DRB Homes, a home builder in the community. And discussing that was asking the question about when you put a subdivision in, how much input do the schools have, how many meetings are there with the schools, and that happens kind of on a different level through the counties. Dr. Saxe, when a new subdivision is being talked about, how much involvement does the school have in terms of saying, we're over capacity, don't put it there, or yeah, we'll just figure out a way how to make it work?
Well, what I'll say is I think that the involvement of the schools has improved over the last 6 or 7 months in that process. We have developed a relationship with the Planning Commission so that when a proposal is brought forth, they will submit those plans to us and allow for us to provide input. Now, I don't know that that our input can prevent the growth from happening, but at least the Planning Commission has a very good understanding of what could be impacted as it relates to our school capacities and so on and so forth. So I definitely appreciate the Planning Commission involving the school district for feedback, and we've been trying to provide more meaningful feedback to the Planning Commission in those regards.
Can I follow up on that from a different aspect? Sure. Impact fees, something the schools, the county is going to be looking at very seriously in the next few weeks. Have you been in discussion with the county about the potential utilization of impact fees for the schools?
Yes, they have a group that is a third party, nonpartisan group that is going to provide recommendations, and so we've been providing input and information to that group so that they can see where our overcapacities are, where we're focusing on where we need to either add classrooms, add schools, so that as they form recommendations for how those impact fees could be implemented, that the school district has a seat at that table for sure.
Is there an established formula that when a new housing development is going in, it's 200 homes, that those 200 homes are going to put X number of children into the school system? Yes,
there is a formula. I don't have the exact number memorized, but there is an equation that says for every X number of homes, then we would probably yield X number of students.
I think it was like 0.7.
Yeah,
if I remember. I'm not 100% certain on that, but that sounds familiar.
Yeah,
and then there has to be a presumption of age, right, for the progression through the.
It just tells us how many. It doesn't give a presumption. Well, we don't get in that formula how many students by age, but we do know that it may yield X number of students for every so many houses. And then, of course, the other big indicator of our enrollment increase is actually job creation. There's actually a very high correlation for job creation, and it's much higher. It's almost like. Again, I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but I mean it's significant. It's like for every 10 jobs, you're going to yield about 3 students, kind of thing. So it's a much higher yield. And the thing is, that's not just in Berkeley County. That's in surrounding counties. When jobs are created because people are choosing Berkeley to live, that impacts our schools too. So even over if they're building relocating a large business in Winchester or in Maryland, it's going to impact our schools here in Berkeley County.
Well, we just had Christian Fisher from Commercial Meadows on a couple of days ago, and that's 230 employees when that factory opens up. Mm-hmm. And you got a lot of moving parts to consider in your job, because at some point you got to pull the trigger on, we need a new school, we need to build new, whatever you call the trailers, learning cottages or whatever. So that's...
No, you're exactly right. And that's where, we've had enrollment studies done and projections based upon where we are currently. We expect that by the year 2032 that we're going to have roughly another 2,500 students in the county. And that's if nothing else changes.
Another 2,500?
Another 2,500 students. So that's if nothing else changes. So I think that's one of those things that we have to be able to be at the table to know where this growth is occurring so that we can invest in the infrastructure for our students.
So you're around 22,000, 23,000 now?
We are right at 20,000 right now.
20,000, so another 2,500 in the next few years.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
10% growth. Hey, Dr. Saxe, our guest here on the program, are there areas of the county right now where you're so over capacity you would not want to see a subdivision go in?
Well, I think that it's not about necessarily. I mean, obviously, there's concerns as a citizen as it relates to traffic and road infrastructure. I think as it relates to schools, obviously, the northern part of the county we're busting at the seams. The southern end of the county we're busting at the seams. Whatever happens, we will have to accommodate that growth by either adding infrastructure or redistricting and balancing enrollment at several schools. Many of our schools, like at, for example, Potomac or Mill Creek or wherever you may look, many of those schools we are not able to have. We have to have overflows to other schools because even for the kids that are in that zone, we just don't have enough seats within a certain grade level, and that's always it's always a challenge. Now, the other thing is that adds to our transportation costs because your zone there, we have to move you, so we have a responsibility to accommodate transportation, and so those things, just because it's a capacity issue and you may not have enough seats, does impact the budget well beyond just having to build new buildings. We're having to see increased costs for transportation to transport students to a place where we can accommodate them.
Let's talk about vaccination laws. They may be changed. The Senate is looking at some changes right now. We'll talk with Senator Jason Barrett in the next segment here in regards to the laws. You have to implement those as they work in public schools. One of the exemptions that was proposed was the ability to track the number of kids who are not vaccinated. That exemption was voted, or that amendment was voted out. It won't take place. Would that type of information be useful or valuable to you as a school official to know what percentage of your population was not vaccinated?
Well, first of all, let me say that what we're going to continue to focus on is making sure that our students have access to safe, healthy learning environments. I think that whether or not we have that information or the health department has access to that information is probably what would be important, so that if any type of outbreak was to occur, that there would be the ability to be able to control or mitigate any kind of spread. I mean, that just comes from my experience of working, during the COVID years. But what we're going to focus on is we're going to focus on making sure that every student that's in our building is in a safe, healthy learning environment, and that they're providing, they're getting opportunities for excellent education. I think that there are many different viewpoints on this, and I think that whatever occurs, whatever policies are in place, we're going to focus on making sure that we provide those safe learning environments for our students.
Let me push back a little bit on that. Not that
Sure.
I do not agree with that. I think we should have a safe learning environment. But the amendments or the lack of amendments just been pushed through with the vaccination. Doesn't that make your development a safe environment more difficult? If the children are not vaccinated?
Well, I think that that if you have more students that are not vaccinated and are susceptible to contracting a virus or what have you, then obviously that's going to impact those students. Yes.
So
For
then,
families-
how do you ensure there is a safe environment?
Well, I would hope that whatever policies or guidance that has been established through legislation or through protocols that perhaps the health department asks us to adhere to would mitigate those risks.
But again, if your hands are tied, if the health department's hands are tied, how do you promote that safe environment?
Well, again, I think that we would have to be able to take a look at what policies what policies would exist at that time and be able to react to those things. I would say that, again, I think there are many strong viewpoints on this, and I come from a family of medical practitioners that believe in vaccines and believe that the research around what helps keep the community safe are important. But I also respect the spiritual, religious beliefs of others. And if whatever is created or whatever is imposed, then we will have a responsibility as a school district to comply with that.
What happens now if somebody? COVID is different because nobody was vaccinated against COVID early on, right? So it was something to be really terrified of until we learned something. If a child were to come to school, or if a child at a school was diagnosed with measles or chickenpox or polio or so, what is the procedure now in terms of how is that handled? Are they isolated, or are they?
Well, so we have emergency response plans for just about any kind of scenario you can imagine, including a health outbreak. Our first response is going to be able to reach out to the health department to make sure that whatever the outbreak or whatever the diagnosis of one student is or multiple students, that we are following the protocols that the health department sets forth. Sometimes that's going to be that you isolate the student. Sometimes, and when I say isolate, that means that they are going homebound or what have you, and that and depending upon what it is, we may have a responsibility to notify other families to say, hey, look, you have been in close contact with someone who has this, and you need to be looking for these symptoms. So we are going to ask that you keep your child home for a few days, or they can still come to school, but look for these symptoms so we know. Again, we're going to be seeking guidance from the health department to make sure that whatever the outbreak is, or whatever the diagnosis is for one of those students, that we're following those protocols.
Because every year, kids are germ factories. So every year, probably about this time, is when you get the bug, whatever is the bug of the year. And I know it happens because then I get it from the neighbor's kids. And right. So how was that handled? It's just one of those things does the letter go out saying, hey, there's a something virus that's going around, be careful, or does it?
That can happen at certain times when we have a certain number of, once we reach a certain threshold of students, that are absent or sick. But we also work with our custodial staff to make sure that high touch points, get extra cleaning during the cold and flu season. The district has invested in making sure that we have extra cleaning supplies during those times. And so I think that that's something that we work through. But we definitely try to inform our families when there is a major problem. But then we also make sure that our custodial staff and our maintenance staff ramp up their cleaning and disinfecting of high touch points and classroom desks and those sort of things.
As a general rule, if you have to send a child home or put a child in isolation, are the parents cooperative? As a general rule.
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah, absolutely.
Dr. Ryan Saxe, our guest here on the program. Switching gears, let's go to a subject we touched on in your last visit, and that was school safety officers and the county's plan to implement their own safety officers, so to speak. How is that progressing?
Well, we're doing excellent, by the way. So, obviously we have great relationships with our school resource officers and our municipality, City of Martinsburg, as well as the Sheriff's Department for our high schools. In our middle schools, I am proud to say that we have every single middle school covered with a school safety officer.
How long has that been the case?
Since first part of January, we were able to actually have everybody in place.
Is that different than an SRO?
It is different than an SRO. So a school safety officer in Berkeley is a retired police officer. They're able to carry a weapon, and of course they're there to keep the school safe, to build relationships with students of trust, and so that if there is something, they can report it. They're a presence, but they do not have the ability to arrest. So they would have to refer something to law enforcement if there needed to be an arrest on campus. But they're there as a deterrent. They're there as a stopgap. They are there to make sure that the school remains safe. And to ask you, but the other thing I think is important is that we are going to try to expand that down to our intermediate schools next year by hiring some additional officers as well. So again, we're looking at expanding that down into our other programmatic.
And they're in your middle schools now?
Yep, every middle school. So we have 6 school safety officers.
So 6 middle schools?
6 middle schools.
How many intermediate schools do you have?
6. Mm-hmm. Yep. And then I have to go back and add, but quite a few primary schools.
Primary schools, okay. And The officers, the training, what is the training before you can put them into school? What do they have to accomplish?
Well, there is a series of training activities that we put them through to make sure that they not only understand their role as a school safety officer, but specifically the different environment, because it's a school environment. You're working around kids, and here are the things that you need to take into consideration. And Dean Olak is our lead safety officer, does a great job, and he could probably provide a little bit more details as to the nuances of all the training that they go through. But it is substantial.
Are you able to fund this through your local budget, or are you getting some support from the state?
No, this is 100% a commitment from our Board of Education, district prioritization of our general budget. Yeah.
How did you find the money for them?
You prioritize it. You say this is important to us, and it means that you may not be able to do something else that you prefer to do, but we're prioritizing these in our schools.
Are they school employees with the full benefits of working for the school, or are they subcontracted?
Well, we contract with Epic, but to employ these folks, but they have full benefits through Epic. So they're sort of an Epic operates as sort of an agency for us to provide contracted services for folks. But they get full benefits, retirement, health insurance, which is through the state as well.
Are they uniformed?
We provide uniforms for them. A lot of times sometimes it's a polo, but you can definitely identify them as a school safety officer when they're in their buildings. So they're not in casual clothes.
Are many of them with a law enforcement background?
They all have law enforcement background. Yep, they're all some form of retired law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Over the winter break, did you find that there were a substantial number of retirements that you had to replace more teachers or those who left?
I wouldn't say substantial. We had a few that retired, but it wasn't anything that was unexpected or a surge. We continue to have I would say challenges in filling some of our vacancies. So we have permanent subs in those places, and we're having to provide additional professional development and embedded support for those folks. But we are trying to find ways that we can not only attract more people that are certified to our school district, but also make sure that we can keep them longer as well.
What's your number count in terms of teacher shortages right now in Berkeley County?
I don't have that with me, but I know that we have about somewhere in the neighborhood of about 200 permanent subs across the county right now.
When do you start interviewing those who will be graduating with education degrees in this upcoming spring?
Well, we're pretty proactive. So when we know that we have, for example, our student teachers or people that are getting, graduating from, let's say, the winter, we're interviewing. We have open vacancies for substitute positions that gets them in the door quicker. And then, of course, we're going through personnel season right now, where we make decisions as to, different class enrollment variations, where we have to move staff for next year. Once we get through that, which will probably be toward the end of April, then we'll actually have postings for next school year up and ready to go. So we start that process.
What did you have that you wanted to cover today that we haven't gotten to yet?
Well, I'm really excited today. I will be spending this afternoon with my Student Leadership Advisory Council, so I have a special advisory council made up of middle school and high school students from all across the county. And, it's very important to me that as we move forward as a school district, that we get input from our stakeholders. That's our parents, that's our families, that's our staff. But what's so important is our students. And so I have a great group of students I've met with now 2 or 3 times. But they're working on some. One of the things that's very important to them is the social emotional health of their fellow classmates, and so they're going through some activities as we speak. And then I'll be learning from them what they would like to see us do in being able to provide more support for students across the district in the next coming year. So
among the students, what are the grades represented?
6 through 12. So I have 6th grade through 12th grade. Every school has 3 to 4 representatives, and these representatives are not, just the elected student council folks. I actually asked for a diverse group of students, some that have had behavior issues or attendance issues or Maybe some are in AP, but some are athletic, or some are CTE. Some are a little bit more disengaged, and so we have tried to be very selective in picking a very representative group of all of our students, so that there's a voice.
You used a term of art I haven't heard before: social emotional health. What does that translate to?
So, I think that when we think about social emotional health, just is being able to have when we think about depression or feeling down or just dealing with our own hormones as we're growing up, we can feel down on ourselves. We can have depression if you're get into a conflict with a peer or a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever. That can affect our mental health. And so making sure that we have systems in place so that students know how to cope, especially in this day and age of the cell phone, where you have reels and you're comparing yourself to all these other people out there. That can affect your health. Is making sure that we're taking care of each other, and that students recognize that if they are feeling down, that there are resources and other people who care that can help them through those things.
We have a question from a longtime educator in the area. If Title I funding is reduced, how's that going to impact Berkeley County?
And you have a minute to address that.
I can do that. So there are many questions we have right now over federal funding, obviously. The appropriations, we know that our poverty rate in Berkeley has reduced. So we're going to see lower Title I. It could be that some schools will no longer be served. It could mean that we have to reduce staffing in some of the Title I schools as it relates to those that are funded through federal programs. But we're working through that. And but the short answer is that we could see reductions in support or staff for Title I schools.
Federal Department of Education, if it is completely eliminated block grants to the states, advantageous to Berkeley County or not?
I think that's yet to be seen. I think that whatever happens, we're going to have to learn about how those changes are going to affect our school district. But it may mean that there's less regulation, less red tape, and allows us to use those dollars in a more efficient way for our students.
Could be a good thing.
Could be a good thing.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Dr. Saxe, good to see you again.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.
And doing these regular appearances during the school year here.